Hi.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We'll start the introduction very slowly to allow people to join. We're very sorry to hear about the recent event in Ukraine. Hopefully, everyone and their loved one are safe. As you all know, we are trying to realize a little bit the impact of this recent event and the recent events. Before I do the introduction of Dr. Jessika Hurts, just want to do some housekeeping thing. As you all know, this is the Stanford Project for Ukraine. We've been doing lectures for over a year now, and the frequency of the lectures now is about once a month. We will be taking a break over the summer, and we'll be resuming in September. The topics that we've covered are quite wide, mostly related to autism and autism spectrum disorder, and we've covered some topic related to pediatric mental health. The presentations or the webinars are on our website. People have access to them, and I want to thank here Dana for helping us out in this process, and I want to express my appreciation for Irena and Dimitri, who have been doing the interpretation, live interpretation to Russian and Ukrainian respectively. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. The other topic is that I want to express my appreciation for Ali, because this is her last webinar. She's coordinating the webinar and she's been helping us out for over a year in this project. Ali is moving on. So thank you, Ali, for all your help over the last year.
Thank you.
Okay. We will definitely miss you, especially during this project. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jessika Hurts, who is a clinical assistant professor here in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University. Dr. Hurts completed her internship at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and completed her professional education, specifically her degree from Palo Alto University, Stanford PsyD Consortium here in Palo Alto, and completed her postdoc at Stanford University, the Child Psychology Postdoctoral Fellowship. And then we couldn't let her go, so we made all our effort to keep her. Today, Dr. Hurts will be talking about the program for the education and enrichment of relational skills, which is the PEERS program. Dr. Hurts have been developing expertise in this area, and we're very excited to hear about her lecture today. So thank you, Jessika, and please, you can start.
Thank you, Dr. Hardin. I will just bring up my slides. Thank you all for having me, and good evening to you all. I think it's the evening there. All right, hopefully you all can see that. As Dr. Hardin mentioned, I'll be talking about the program for the education and enrichment of relational skills, also known as PEERS. So today I'll start with just talking about what autism is, how do you get diagnosed with this? That's probably familiar to you all by now, so I won't spend too much time on that. And then I'll talk about the specific unique challenges that are experienced by youth with ASD. We'll talk about the mental health risks that can occur in this population. I'll provide an overview of the PEERS group. I'll provide some recommendations or suggestions or tips for caregivers who are helping teens, work on these skills, and then we'll end with Q&A. So I want to start with just looking at the criteria for autism, because criteria A is all about social skills deficits that can occur within this group of people. And that is the primary issue or challenge that is targeted within the peers group. So oftentimes we see individuals with autism have difficulty with expressing themselves to other people or connecting with other people, developing relationships. So there's quite a bit there that can get in the way of establishing friendships. Criteria B is more of the repetitive and restricted behaviors that can also be can impair their ability to initiate or maintain relationships with other people. So both criteria really can serve as barriers potentially to establishing friendships. But before I go into any of that, I want to just talk a little bit about neurodiversity. Neurodiversity was a term that was coined in 1988, I believe, by Judy Singer, who really wanted people to understand that everyone's brain develops uniquely, and we should appreciate that, about one another. So I really want to say that while there are these challenges that individuals with autism, will experience with social skills, it's also important to recognize that there are many strengths that come with this disorder or this identity that they might have. So it's really important to highlight the strengths of individuals who are neurodiverse, neurodivergent, and that autism doesn't necessarily need to be fixed or cured, which we don't have a cure for autism at this point, and we don't want one. We really want people to accept individuals for who they are, rather than just spreading awareness. And we really want to move in a direction of having people of all colors, abilities, and things feel that they have opportunities for inclusion and equity. And lastly, even though we want to provide individuals who maybe have specific challenges with tools and skills to overcome those challenges, it's ultimately the choice of the individual if they want to use it or not. So, true or false, youth with autism do not want or desire social relationships. Given that I'm about to give this talk that is dedicated to helping individuals with ASD establish relationships, you probably guessed that it is false. Individuals definitely want friendships, they want relationships with other people, but oftentimes they might not have the same opportunities, or they might have difficulties with establishing those relationships for the reasons that I discussed earlier related to the diagnostic criteria. So they absolutely want to connect with other people, but they may need some tools or tips and strategies to be able to do that. What we've seen is that teens and adolescents with autism have fewer friendships. When actually interviewing boys with ASD, Koning and McGill-Evan found that they just are reporting they have fewer relationships and that they have less frequent contact with friends. So it seems like they're not having potentially as good quality or as many friendships overall as their neurotypical counterparts. And then we've also seen that, mothers and parents are reporting that overall they're noticing that their youth have fewer friendships. And when they do have friendships, the duration of that friendship is much shorter than their peers. And they're not meeting up or getting together with their peers nearly as much as other kids. So the specific challenges that we see often is that there's just difficulties with social communication. There might not be that same awareness of the social context. They may struggle with reading social cues or even using nonverbal behaviors to express, their thoughts and emotions and feelings. And, they really do have a lot of challenges with initiating interactions or maybe even responding in an expected way to other kids. And overall, it's just very difficult for them to develop and maintain relationships with other people. And this often can lead to, social rejection. And we see this a lot with the teens who are, higher functioning, meaning that they require less supports. Oftentimes, these are teens who are highly verbal, have, average to above average IQ, and have a lot of social motivation. So they're the ones approaching other kids, but potentially due to some of those repetitive and restricted interests and patterns of behavior, they may engage in behaviors that the other kids around them deem kind of atypical or odd. And that could lead to a lot of that bullying and teasing and exclusion. So it's not always just the kids who have lower IQ or the kids who, may present as lower functioning that are having this difficulty. It's actually more seen in the kids who are seeking those relationships with other people. And because, they're experiencing teasing, bullying, and rejection, they are at risk of negative mental health, outcomes. So a lot of times we see isolation and feelings of loneliness that can be associated with depression. We even saw in a recent meta-analysis that individuals with ASD are approximately 4 times more likely to experience symptoms of depression compared to just the general population. And youth with ASD are exhibiting higher rates of negative self-perceptions like guilt, shame, feelings of worthlessness, and perceived stress, and maybe struggling to cope with that. So due to all of these, challenges that are coming up regarding mental health, we really need programs that can help address the social skills deficits in youth with ASD that can really help them work on these areas of need. So what we do see with friendship is that it can serve as a protective factor. And a protective factor is just any sort of thing that can help protect youth from those mental health risks that we've talked about. So a lot of time protective factors could be having a very accepting and loving community around you, having food, having shelter, having people that they feel like they can talk to. So having friendships can serve as a protective factor for depression and anxiety and these sort of things. And also what we see is that kids who are not alone, who may be traveling with, a group of children or even just one other person, is less likely to be bullied and teased and experience some of that. So just even having one person can really have a huge impact on an individual's life. And we're seeing that it's really associated with higher levels of self-worth. People who have friendships feel better about themselves. They feel that sense of acceptance that is really needed. And what we're also seeing is that sometimes it's about quality over quantity. Even if you just have 1 or 2 friends, but those relationships feel meaningful, they feel reciprocal, meaning that the other person truly wants and is invested in that relationship, that matters a little bit more than just having a group of kids that may not have as close of a relationship with you. So how do we teach these skills? There's been some research done to figure out what are the critical components of teaching social skills, and some of the ways that we can do that is through evidence-based treatment manuals, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The PEERS program is an evidence-based treatment manual that's available. And then we also see that didactics are important. So some sort of lecturing or teaching of skills is critical. Small groups can be really helpful because if you have a group of people, that creates the opportunity to practice the skills, but we don't want it to be so large that potentially some kids are left out, or there's not enough attention to each kid. So having a small group is preferred. Opportunities for modeling, that could be watching videos of the skills, or even just a group leader modeling those skills. And we know that practicing with coaching can be helpful so that you can get the immediate feedback of, yes, you did that skill really well, great job, keep going, or let's try this way instead. And then also caregivers being involved is really important because they're the ones that are going to be the social coaches when the teen is outside of the group. And then having homework in between sessions is really helpful. If they're only practicing once a week when the group meets, that's not going to be sufficient. So having them take the skills and practicing them in between sessions is really important. And we've seen that because the school is a setting that, teens are frequently with their peers, that's a great place to have those interventions. We want kids to be able to practice these skills with their peers right in a setting where it's going to happen frequently. And then we've also seen that inclusion of neurotypical peers can be good. And that's because one, neurotypical peers may be able to model a lot of these social skills that are a little bit difficult for individuals with ASD, but also it's going to lead to that sense of inclusion and acceptance. The individual who's neurotypical is going to have more experience with, neurodivergent people, and then that individual with who's neurodivergent will also have that experience of connecting with a neurotypical peer. So now I'll go into the peers group and program. It is a world-renowned program that has been studied and proven to be effective in improving relationships with young adults, teens, middle schoolers, all sorts of ages, and also has been shown to be not only effective with individuals who have ASD, but also ADHD, anxiety, depression, and other socio-emotional difficulties. It was originally developed by Dr. Elizabeth Lageson at the University of California, Los Angeles, and it's been translated into over a dozen languages and is used in over 125 countries across the globe. Unfortunately, it has not made its way to you all, but hopefully it will soon. So far, they've come up with quite a few different books and manuals. The Science of Making Friends is, for parents who want to learn more about how they can be better social coaches and help their teens develop friendships. This book here, the yellow one, is the one that we'll be mainly focusing on today. It's designed for middle school and high school children. And this next one is for young adults. So the curriculum changes a little bit because young adults start to have more responsibilities potentially, like college or their first jobs or even just dating. So they have, strategies for, how to approach those different things that they're experiencing as they enter adulthood. And then we have the peers curriculum for school-based professionals, so for teachers or school counselors and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of adaptations of this program to suit different settings and time periods in someone's life. So, a lot of these programs are really great. So we'll talk about the peers program today. As I mentioned, it is best for middle school and high school, so about 11 to 17 years old. Here at Stanford, we mainly focus on high school age kids, so we're doing 13 to 17. The curriculum is provided over 14 weeks. Each session is about 90 minutes. And there is a teen group leader and a parent group leader, and both groups meet at the same time. The teens are off learning a lot about the specific skill of the day, and the parents are also learning about that skill and also being provided with tips and strategies on how to coach their teen in doing that skill. And to be able to participate in this group, the teen has to be motivated to make friends. We don't necessarily accept kids who who are being kind of dragged to the group by their parent because their parent is wanting them to make friends. It just doesn't really work well. So when they participate in the initial phone screen or intake process, the teen is explicitly asked if this feels like a group that they'd be interested in, and if they want to give it a try. So then the group involves didactics. Like, as I mentioned, it's so important to actually teach the skill. They will get modeling from the group leader, as well as get to view video examples. And they get to practice in the session with the other group members. And then they're provided with homework that they have to complete in between sessions. So the different topics that are covered over the 14 weeks include trading information. As you all are probably aware, when you're first getting to know someone, there is the first step of just trading information, just talking to them. And I did forget to mention that to also participate in this group, the individual has to be at average or above average IQ and be able to participate verbally. As far as I know, there's not an adaptation that's been made for individuals who are non-speaking, unfortunately. So they do have to be speaking. So yeah, so they'll practice trading information. They'll practice two-way conversation. So not only trading information, but to be able to have that back and forth going. And they'll review the appropriate use of electronic communication. They'll discuss the best way to choose appropriate friends. There is a section dedicated to how to use humor or appropriately use humor. They learn how to enter and exit a conversation. There's a section that's dedicated to how to set up and engage in a get-together. We review how to be a good sport and talk about how to address and handle teasing and embarrassing feedback. We review, what to do when you're being bullied or have a bad reputation, and provide strategies and skills on how to handle disagreements, what to do with rumors and gossip, and then we end with the graduation and termination. And the way that these topics were, chosen was that Dr. Lageson really looked at what are the skills needed to develop a friendship, and what are the specific challenges that we see in the autism population that interfere with that, and then came up with these different sections. I will say that a lot of what is in this book currently is going to be normed for American culture. So some of these things may not necessarily translate well to the culture there. But that's why there's been so many of these adaptations, is that you're going to want to try to work on the skills that are known for the society that you're in. So the structure of the group, as I mentioned, there's a teen group and a parent group that are meeting at the same time. And during the first part of the group, in the very, very first group, there's going to be a discussion of what the expectations are. What is the appropriate behavior, what they can expect in terms of the structure of the group and completing homework, and all of that. But once we've progressed past that first session, the first part of the group is just dedicated to homework review. And we spend a lot of time on this because it's important to figure out how they're doing with using these skills, and if they're running into any issues with finding friends to practice with or with actually doing the skills. We want to spend some time giving them feedback and working with them on that, both in the parent and teen group. The parent group spends even more time on problem solving or troubleshooting homework than the teens, but the teens do spend a good amount of time on that as well. And then once that is done, they'll move into learning the skill of the day. And the skill will be presented in didactics. They'll get a chance to see video examples of how to do that. And then they start to actually practice with their peers in the group, whether it's in small groups or the whole group as a group as a whole, or one-on-one. There's a variety of different ways they might practice. And then the parents are also learning that skill so that when the teen is using it, during the week, the parent can help coach them in that. And then at the very end, we all kind of come together, talk about the next homework session for the day, and just debrief what's been learned. In the first 3 sessions of the group, they're learning the foundations of conversational skills. As I mentioned before, being able to carry on a conversation can be really critical to developing a relationship with someone. So they're going to be learning the specific steps to doing that, like asking someone about their interests, sharing something that is related to that interest. So staying on topic, finding common interests. That is a major part of developing friendships is, knowing that you have something in common. And then asking open-ended questions. You don't want to just ask yes, no questions. We want to ask questions that can lead to more of a discussion or conversation. And we're going to encourage them to share the conversation. A lot of times, individuals might just rattle off a bunch of information about their own interests. So we're going to encourage them to be more aware of that and try to ask about the other person's interests as well as share about their own. And then we want to listen. That can actually be pretty hard to focus and actually take in the information that the other person is saying. So reminding them it's really important to listen so you'll know what to say next. And we want them to use good volume and good body boundaries. We'll see. I wanted to show you guys an example of the videos that they would be watching in the group that highlight how to trade information in a very effective way. So I'm going to give this a shot. All right. Antonio, can you see that? Can anyone? Hopefully you guys can see it. All right.
I don't think we see the video.
You don't see the video?
No.
You just see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me try this. All right. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Let me share my computer sound. So this is a video that the group would watch to see how to share information.
Hey Allison, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good. How was your weekend?
It was really nice. How was yours?
It was great. I actually went to the movies.
Oh, cool. What did you see?
I saw that new sci-fi movie.
Oh, I've been wanting to see that.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Have you seen the first one?
I did. I saw the first one. I need to see the second one.
Yeah, the first one was good too.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll make another one?
I hope so.
I know, right? I really hope so.
Yeah. Did you read the books at all?
I read the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read all of the books, so I really hope they make a third.
Yeah, I really want to read the rest of the books.
You should.
Yeah. But you should definitely see the movie. The special effects are so good.
I know. They do a really good job.
Yeah.
All right. So after that, the group would talk about, these different questions, what went well, what did, what could she do differently, or, what looks good about what was happening in that video. All right. I wanted to show you one more. Let's see. And these videos are available on the UCLA Peers Clinic site. And I'm just pulling up the other one. Give me 1 second. This is an example of when the individual who is practicing the skill is being an interviewer. So that means that they're asking a ton of questions, but not really answering the question or getting that reciprocal back and forth. It's more just like question, 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 question. So this is an example of what they don't want to do. Let me show you that. All right.
Allison, how was your weekend?
It was really good. How was yours?
Fine. What'd you do?
I went to the movies with some friends.
Oh yeah, what movie did you see?
Just the new sci-fi movie.
Oh yeah, did you like it?
I did. Have you seen it?
Which movie theater did you go to?
Just my neighborhood one.
Oh, do you go there often?
I do. Have you ever been?
Who do you usually go with?
Just friends.
Okay, what do you and your friends do other than go to the movies?
Go out to eat.
Oh, what kind of food do you like to eat?
Italian food.
Oh, so do you like pizza or pasta?
Both.
Oh. Do you like Chinese food?
Sure.
Oh yeah? What's your favorite kind of Chinese food?
Like, all of it.
Okay. What other food do you like?
I don't know.
So in this situation, you can see towards the end, the person that is being talked to or, being interviewed is starting to get a little bit frustrated because they're noticing they're not able to actually participate in the conversation other than answering the questions. And when we see this, it's not because the individual with autism is not wanting to, share. It might just be that they're still learning the skill and ultimately haven't quite figured out how to get that more reciprocal back and forth trading of information, and are maybe focused on just making sure they answer questions. So in that case, we'd want to make sure to give them some feedback of, pause and let the other person provide some questions, or at least answer some of the questions that they are directing towards you. All right, now let me go back to my slides. This is not a part of the peers group, but is a tool that sometimes I will recommend if the teen is not quite able to monitor themselves very well, meaning they aren't really checking in to see if they're asking too many questions or not answering their questions. So sometimes using a visual like this, where you kind of write out the steps, like first ask a question, wait for the answer, then we would want to comment on the answer, ask a new question, and then make sure you're remaining on topic. And if they do all four of these things, they can give themselves a check mark. This can help them to just make sure they're doing everything, but eventually we'd want to fade this out because it probably wouldn't be very natural or typical if you bring a sheet with you every time you meet with a friend. But when they're practicing with parents or family members, this can be one way to make sure they're hitting the different steps and not just asking questions or just, talking and not allowing the other person to ask them questions. So one skill that you could potentially introduce if they're needing some more support. In the peers group, we spend a lot of time talking about sources of friends, because if we want to build friendships, we're going to have to figure out how to go find those kids that can be good fits. So one of the ways we would do that is just explore the activities that would likely include teens that share the same interests as your child. If your child's interested in basketball, we would want to go look for, leagues in the community, or is there a basketball team at their school, or, is there, some sort of group that meets up and they, play together, or just going to the park if there's a basketball court. So thinking about what your child is interested in and trying to find activities or groups that have teens who are also interested in that. And then we also talk about just the groups and crowds that would be a good fit for the teen. So if your child is really interested in computers, but doesn't really like sports, we're going to focus more on finding groups that are tailored more towards kids who love computers, and maybe avoid trying to get them involved in those other activities. Because not only is it maybe hard to socialize, but if we throw in an added layer of a activity that they don't feel good about or that they're not interested in, that might hurt the interactions with others even more. So we're going to really want to try to build success by finding those activities they're interested in, as well as pairing them with kids who are also interested in that same thing. And parents are going to be playing a big role in this. We're going to really rely on them to be signing their kids up for activities or taking them to places that are going to have kids that their child can interact with. Nowadays, electronic communication is really important. A lot of youth are using texting, computers, Discord, email, all these sort of things, online gaming. But we have not necessarily had as much time to catch up with how, quickly technology has progressed. So it's so important to speak with youth about the appropriate and safe way to use electronic communication. Some of these things are as simple as make sure you only call someone like 1 or 2 times. If they don't call you back, that might be a sign that they're not interested in having a conversation with you potentially, or at least allow them to get back to you when they're available instead of just repetitively calling. And some of it is more about making sure that the information you share is appropriate. We wouldn't ever want to share personal information like our name or our address or pictures of us on these sort of different devices or ways of communicating, especially with someone we don't know very well. But sometimes that is not as apparent or obvious to youth who are still developing their frontal cortex. So we really want to make sure we are, coaching them in safe use of these different sort of devices and monitoring their use until you feel that, they are using it appropriately and safely. In session 4, we talk more about how to create opportunities for friendship. So one of the ways is just finding opportunities at school to make friends. So that might be before school starts or while you're, at lunch or after school, thinking about ways you might be able to slip into a conversation or start a conversation with your peers. Like I said, joining groups that are related to your interests. There's lots of clubs and groups typically at school or even in the community that might be available, but making sure we get them, signed up for those different groups. We would want to consider extracurricular activities. So these might be, things like music or, karate or other programs and things that are outside of the school. And there are, community agencies and organizations that put together events that are available for youth. So you'd potentially consider going to those sort of things. And lastly, just anywhere you think there would be teens, like at an arcade, a movie, maybe a library, like wherever you think there might be other kids that your child might be able to practice these skills or, start a relationship with other kids their same age. In session 5, we talk about appropriate use of humor. So there are a lot of kids who are joke tellers, meaning they really enjoy making other people laugh and using humor. And sometimes that goes really well. And sometimes it might be really uncomfortable. For those kids, we would want to just help them recognize that it's important to pay attention to the humor feedback. We want to make sure we know what other people are feeling about our humor. If they are non-verbally showing us that they don't think it's funny or they feel uncomfortable, or maybe they're just not interested in your jokes, we would want them to be able to pick up on that, those social cues, and potentially exit or, kind of apologize or maybe, pause on the jokes for the moment. But, we also encourage them to avoid repeating jokes. Sometimes when kids find a joke that they really like, they just say it over and over and over again. But, when we hear a joke several times, it kind of loses its humor, its power. So we want to kind of make sure they're paying attention to that. And we don't want them to use insult jokes. We don't want them to use jokes that are, potentially racist or hurtful in any sort of way. So we would, encourage them to avoid that. And, to think about when the best time is to tell jokes. If you're in the middle of class and the kid next to you is really focused on what the teacher is saying, that is not going to be a good time to tell a joke. But if you're sitting at lunch with other kids and you have something you think would be funny, that might be a more appropriate time to tell the joke. And also, we kind of talk about when you're first getting to know someone, it may not be helpful to spend too much time being a joke teller. Sometimes kids might enjoy that, but some might be a bit surprised that most of what you're saying is humor. So we ask them to mix in just a little bit more of that getting to know you, information seeking and trading opportunities. In order to kind of form connections with other people, a very critical skill is entering and exiting a group. So it's kind of similar to jump rope when you have to know the right timing and you have to kind of watch what other people are doing to know if it's a good time or safe time to enter the conversation. So we always encourage them to just watch first and maybe listen. And if they know someone in the conversation, that's even better, even if it's someone that they just are in the same class with, but just paying attention. And then if they hear something about like maybe a common interest, maybe they can wait for a pause and try to join that conversation and join by potentially making like a quick comment or asking a question that's related to the conversation. And then really paying attention to see if they're being received. The group kind of opens up to them and they're like, yeah, that's funny. And they kind of respond to the teen who's entering the conversation, then they might want to stick around and continue. But if they're noticing that the group is kind of looking at them like, what are you doing? Why are you joining our conversation? Or, we're not looking to add to our group right now, then we would want the teen to be able to recognize that and exit the conversation. So we also go over how to do that. So first, just checking for signs of interest. Does the group seem interested in having you there? No? Okay, it might be time to exit. We want to keep calm, so we don't want to maybe become really upset or dysregulated if, we're not being accepted. You might start by just slowly looking away and not making eye contact with the group and turning your body away and just kind of casually exiting and walking away. If the teen was initially accepted to the group, they might provide like a brief reason for leaving, like, oh, I got to go off to class, or I'm going to go grab my lunch, so that it feels like a more natural exit. But if they weren't, ever included, or no one really responded to them when they tried to enter, they don't necessarily need to provide a reason for why they're leaving. And if they were not included, we'd want the teen to reflect on what was the reason for that. Is it that group of kids is just not good for them? It's not, a good fit, and they should maybe try other groups that might be filled with kids who want to include them? Or is it that maybe when they jumped in and interrupted the group or talked about something not related, then maybe they would want to try a different approach in the future that would allow for a smoother transition into the conversation. In session 8, they've now kind of gotten the foundation and tons of experiences and practice, hopefully, with actually interacting with kids that are in the group and outside of the group. So now we're going to think about actually getting together with someone. So inviting someone that they've been talking to come hang out with them at their house, or potentially somewhere else. And we talk about what the role of the teen is and what the role of the parent is during these get-togethers or hangouts. So before the get-together, we would want the teen to determine who's going to come, what they're going to do, where they're going to do it, and when they're going to get together. And if it's going to be at their house, they're going to want to think about what activities that they can do and have ready to go. At the very beginning of the get-together, we're going to want them to greet their guest. So, going to the door, saying hi, I'm glad that you're able to come over, inviting them in, potentially providing them with like a very brief tour of like, okay, here's the bathroom if you need it. Here's the kitchen if you would like some water. You can also ask me. We're going to be hanging out here in the living room. So helping to orient this person to the home, especially if it's the first time they're going there. And then, it can be kind to offer food or drinks. And then definitely want to seek their opinion on which activities they want to do. Even though you're hosting, it's always important to figure out if your guest is interested in the activity that you're presenting. So these can be some things that we want to explicitly say, because some individuals will just, open the door and maybe walk away and expect their friend to follow them to wherever they're going. So they may not always have these things in mind. So we're going to want to, prepare them for that. And then during the get together, we want to encourage the teen to, praise and compliment their friend, really show good sportsmanship, avoid any sort of arguments or, criticizing the other person. And, if they become bored, instead of potentially just like walking away or saying, I don't want to do this anymore, they might just suggest a change. And sometimes, kids who have not had a lot of experience with having friends to their house might not know what it's going to feel like when maybe the friend is interested in touching some of their toys or using their favorite controller or doing these sort of things. So it can be really helpful to prepare your teen by saying, when we invite people over, they might, want to explore your toys or touch your things. So if there's anything that you definitely don't want other people to touch, we might want to keep it in an area that, your friend is not going to be looking at, to avoid any sort of, frustration or escalation of a problem that might happen. And then at the end of the get together, we want to provide a cover story, and cover stories are basically just reasons for like leaving or entering a conversation. So a cover story at the end of a get together could be like, oh, it's getting late, I think we're going to have dinner soon. Or, it's time to start getting ready for bed, or, it's been really nice spending time with you, but now I need to, do this or do that. And then we want to walk the friend to the door, thank them for coming. And if, your teen had a great time, we want them to say that, like, that was really fun, maybe we can do it again sometime. And then, saying goodbye. So really helping them to end the get together on a positive note, and appropriately escort their friend to the door. So the role of the caregiver is to provide a safe and comfortable environment. We don't want parents to be overly involved unless you feel like you really need to be, but you want to give your teen some space, but every once in a while, just check in, maybe offer some snacks and drinks, and just hear how things are going and observe from a distance so that, when the get together is over, you can provide some of that feedback of like, oh, I noticed that you started kind of interviewing your friend. Maybe next time you can, pause and let them ask you some questions. But not doing that in the middle of the get together, but you want to observe so that you can provide that feedback afterwards. And you want to help the teen organize an activity that might be of interest to both your teen and the friend who's coming over. And prior to the get together, it might be helpful to remind them the steps of trading information. So it's fresh in their mind what they need to do to be able to engage with their friend and keep the conversation going. And then you may need to help them provide a cover story at the end. Some kids don't necessarily think about, ending greetings or starting greetings. So they might just kind of be like, okay, bye, and walk away. And that could feel potentially like cold to the other person. So you may have to help them with a cover story by just saying like, okay, it's been great to have you. Like, let me give your mom a call. It's time to wrap up, and, we're looking forward to having you again. So the parent may need to support them in that way. We notice that because individuals with autism can be a little bit rigid sometimes around rules, they can sometimes struggle with good sportsmanship. So we really want to encourage youth to praise their friends when they're playing games. Doesn't mean they have to be overly, kind, or, sometimes they are going to maybe feel a little bit frustrated that they lost, but it is nice to say things like good game or, great job doing that. And we really want them to also avoid being the referee, the person who is making sure all the rules are being followed. because that could be kind of frustrating and annoying to other kids if they feel like, you're policing or controlling the game. And, you may be really skilled at something that your friend is not as skilled at. So the teen may like feel tempted to coach them on things like, okay, we're playing soccer, you need to make sure that you keep your foot like this or something. And peers may not respond well to that. They may not want to be coached. So only coaching if, the friend asks like, hey, can you help me do this? Or do you have any tips for me? And we want to encourage them to really share and take turns. That can be another thing that can be hard, is when someone, youth with ASD are really, really into something. It may be hard for them to shift to another thing or shift their focus away when it might be the turn of the other person. So we want to really practice taking turns so that when they're in a situation with other kids, they're able to do that. And, if the teen is getting bored, again, suggest the change. Say like, hey, we've been playing this for a while. Do you think you want to do something else for a while or play something new? Instead of, like I said, just kind of walking away. And we want to avoid gloating if we win. We don't want them to say, I won, or, celebrate so much that it makes the other person feel bad. And if they do lose and they're feeling really frustrated, we want them to practice kind of managing those emotions, because if they get really, really upset when they lose a game and the other peer is kind of like worried or confused, that could lead to, disconnect or the other peer just leaving and not wanting to play anymore. So really working on how to effectively and kindly play games with other kids so that everyone's kind of having a good time. The next session 10, is dedicated to how to handle teasing and embarrassing feedback. So one big thing that the kids are coached on is just minimizing their reaction. A lot of times bullies or kids that are teasing really want a response. They want a reaction. So if you give that to them, it's kind of like giving them that power or reinforcing that bullying behavior. So the first thing you want to do is just try to minimize any sort of response or reaction to it. And in the peers manual, they talk about teasing the tease, which is basically trying to kind of brush off what's happening. So if somebody is saying something mean or, doing something that is kind of annoying or rude, not physical activity though, but just, saying something, you might just say, who cares, whatever, and try to brush it off. So you might be reacting, but you're reacting in a way where it seems like you're just not really bothered by it. But you can also just say nothing and shrug your shoulders and walk away. But we don't want to necessarily use the tease with somebody who is being physically aggressive. If anyone is ever like physically harming you, you would want to just go get help right away and not pretend like it's not a big deal. And if sometimes teens, not all teens, will have some challenges with hygiene. Maybe they're not showering as much, or they're not remembering to put on deodorant, or they may only like wearing a certain shirt, so they wear that shirt over and over again. And sometimes their peers will comment on their hygiene or their behavior. And sometimes that could be kind of hurtful. So we would want the teen to seek out their parents and ask for advice. Other kids have been talking about how my body smells, or, the fact that I've been wearing this shirt every day. Do you have can you help me figure this out? And then parents can kind of help problem solve with their teen. And then again, with bullying, when it's more like physically aggressive bullying or more intense bullying, then we really want to just avoid the bully altogether. We definitely don't want to provoke them. So we don't want to approach them or try to, talk badly about them. We would want to hang out with other people so that, we have a little bit of that protection, knowing that there's someone else present with us. And then we would want to seek help from an adult if if they're feeling like they're in danger or that the bully is going to try to hurt them or has hurt them. When it comes to a bad reputation, meaning maybe kids have started to say that the teen is maybe like a really bad sport, or, they say really awkward jokes, or, they've become associated with something and the teen feels bad about it. They don't want to be associated with that anymore and they want to change their reputation. Then we would want to kind of help them know what sort of safe and healthy behaviors they can engage in. We'd want to help them, be aware of their behaviors and kind of act in a way that is the opposite of what people think of them potentially. And, if there is a reputation that they have developed that has to do with behaviors that they've done in the past, like I said, for example, like saying inappropriate jokes, they can own up to it and say, listen, I know that people are saying that I'm the type of person that says really uncomfortable jokes, but I'm not doing that anymore. I understand that was hurtful, and I'm trying to change. And sometimes the best thing is just finding a new group or crowd and kind of trying to start over a bit. But this is only if the teen feels like there's a bad reputation against them that they want to change. If they, for example, just love like Sonic and that's one of their preferred interests, but that's a reputation they have and they don't care about it because they do love Sonic, they don't necessarily need to change that at all. This is only if, they've noticed that people are, they've felt that, he's the person, the teen is doing a behavior that people don't feel comfortable with and they want to change it. So in session 12, we talk about handling disagreements. So the first thing is just remaining calm. And then it's really nice to be able to listen to the other person first, which can be really hard for, I think, anyone. But it's an important skill to be able to listen and hear someone out. And then make sure that you're hearing them right by repeating what you've heard. So I'm hearing you say that you're upset with how I handled the situation, or that, you were offended when I said this. And then once you've heard them out, you can share your side. It's important to let other people know your experience. And if you've heard theirs, they might be more willing to hear yours. And then if necessary, you might want to apologize for, how the other person is being impacted by what you're doing. It may not mean that you feel what you did was wrong, but at least you can acknowledge the impact that it had on someone else. And then together, hopefully you can engage in problem solving, how both of you or, the group of you would want to handle something different in the future. And then the last session before we have the graduation goes over how to handle rumors and gossip. So in high school, there is a lot of rumors. I mean, even middle school too, there's a lot of rumors and gossip that can happen. So we provide them with tips on how to avoid being the target of gossip, like avoid being friends with people who often gossip. Definitely don't want to provoke people who gossip. And we want to avoid spreading rumors about other people. What do you do when you already are the target of the rumors or gossip is, again, minimize your response, avoid confronting the source of the gossip, maybe act surprised so that, people can clearly see like, whoa, they seem pretty surprised. It doesn't seem like maybe this is true about them. And inform your friends and others who support you that the rumor is ridiculous to help discredit the rumor. So if you've got people you really trust and you say like, everyone's saying this about me, but it's totally not true, and you have them supporting you, that can help stop the rumor from progressing any further. In the last session, we just kind of celebrate, we play games, we give out certificates that for the teens and praise them for all the hard work that they've done, and we do a quick review of the material that we've reviewed. And, critical components of the treatment include really just learning the skills and ways to navigate social situations. That's a major part of the group, is just being educated on these different skills and strategies that they can use to better initiate and maintain relationships with other people. And I think that the chance to watch examples, videos of how it's done right, as well as videos of how maybe you might do it wrong, can help them really see it, and be able to adjust their own behaviors. And within the group, there's so many opportunities to practice with kids their age that, that is another essential part, is just being able to practice it right after they learn it while it's fresh in their mind. And having parents be involved as, social coaches is also really great. They see their parents are dedicated to learning these skills and supporting them in their social development. And parents know exactly what their teens are learning and can really help guide them and coach them in the moment. So it's really important to have caregivers involved. And the out of group homework is really, really important because, again, if they're only practicing it once a week with the kids in their group, that's not going to lead to friendship development. So being able to practice it with kids at school, with kids in the community, that's actually going to lead to more comfort on the individual who's learning it, as well as potentially relationships with the kids that they're practicing with. So how you guys can really help is model and practice social skills with your child. You're a safe space for them to practice these skills without having to worry about being teased or bullied. So really, take advantage of those moments when you guys are driving to school or just hanging out, having dinner together, practicing, trading information or practicing reciprocal conversations. And the caregiver can be very important in terms of getting the teen involved in activities, signing them up for things, helping them connect with maybe kids in the neighborhood, really trying to get them those invitations or get them involved with other kids. Because what we see is that kids with autism are getting fewer invitations, are getting, less opportunities to connect with their peers. So parents might have to step in a little bit more to try to set up some of those interactions. And, parents or caregivers can really provide coaching on conversational engagement skills in the moment. So if you're taking your kid to an event and, you're also there with them, you can, every once in a while, give them some feedback that can help that interaction go. Not necessarily in front of the other person, because that might embarrass them, but if there's moments to, step in when the other child steps away for a second, or, pull your child to the side for a second and let them know, like, I'm noticing you're doing this really well. And I'm noticing that, you're kind of hogging the conversation. You're talking all about your interests. Make sure you ask them about their interests. So being able to coach is really, really important. Here are my references. And now I will pause and take questions.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank you for this comprehensive lecture. I think I've heard, I've heard lectures about peers, but this is like listing like every session, the topic or the focus of every session specifically, and discussing it. So I really appreciate the information. And I want to thank everyone for attending. We have a good number of questions, so we'll try to go over them. Some of them might be related to some of the topics, as you would expect, and might need a little bit more clarification. So let's start. The first question is related, as you expect, part of the peers group is to get kids to engage, but they get distracted.
Yes.
So the question that how we can help kids to stay focused on the conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. I see this a lot in the group, and I see it a lot with kids that I work with individually. when they're in the group, we use a lot of like reinforcement. So, oh, I've noticed that you asked this great question, or I see that you're looking at the speaker and your nonverbal language is showing me that you're paying attention, and they'll get like points for doing that. But when we are like practicing at home, or we're wanting to help the teen stay focused on a conversation that they're having in the community or with peers at school, I always encourage them to try to ask questions, because sometimes kids get distracted because the other person is just going on and on and on and on, and then they kind of just start daydreaming, and they're like, whoa, I was supposed to be listening. So I always encourage them to every once in a while just like jump in and ask questions to give them a break from listening, and then to show that they are attending and get them more involved. The other thing is, you might challenge the child. When you talk to grandma on the phone, I'm going to ask you for 3 examples of something that they said, that grandma said. And if you can give me 3 things, then, we can go to the park or we can do something fun. So using motivation, using reinforcement or reminders of what to do to stay on topic or stay focused in a conversation can sometimes be helpful.
Excellent, excellent. So as we all know, kids on the spectrum, they have challenges with attention in general and attention to social topics. So that's why it's not surprising that this area is very, very challenging. And that's why part of the peers group is to help develop these little reinforcer so kids can stay focused on the conversation. Another question that's related to social communication skills that we see in kids on the spectrum, but also in kids with ADHD. So how can we teach, or how can we support kids so they can listen more and interrupt less?
Yeah. Okay. So again, I think potentially trying to use that reinforcer of, if you can give me information on what's being shared, to try to increase motivation to listen. Sometimes, listening is harder than it is to daydream or to talk about their own interests. But if we can remind them that it's important to have both pieces to share, but also listen, and maybe why that's important, that can sometimes increase their motivation to listen. Specifically, if they are interested in developing friendships, we might have to say, like, you want friends, you want these relationships. One of the best ways to do that is to be able to take turns in the conversation and listen. And if that's good enough to help motivate them to do that, then excellent. But if not, you may have to bring in other sort of, reinforcers or rewards for being able to actually listen and then, convey that information to you.
Very good. And along the same line that you mentioned for the other social skills is to try to reinforce that. And like what you mentioned, some social stories that will help with that. Okay. Now, do you have experience or thoughts, or is there any research there about kids on the spectrum being mentored by adults with autism?
That's interesting. I have not necessarily heard too much about that, but what we do know is that, having a community that you feel accepts you and understands you is very important. So if you did have a mentor who goes through a lot of the similar things that you've gone through, they could help coach you on, unique tips and skills that they've themselves have found helpful, that could be incredibly valuable. So I do think it would be something great to help, youth who are experiencing these challenges feel like they had someone they could turn to. And that was one piece I didn't mention during my talk, is that sometimes when parents are trying to find kids that would be a good fit for their child, they're seeking neurotypical kids. But I think that you should be kind of looking into every groups that have neurodiverse kids, groups that have neurotypical kids, It's more about feeling accepted and being around people who share common interests than it is about having neurotypical friends.
Very good. Thank you. All these questions so far have been translated from either Ukrainian or Russian, and some of them have been sent in advance. So thank you everyone for sending the questions ahead of time.
Thank you.
Now, next question. So with regard to peers, any experience with implementing the peers program in high school?
Yes, like actually in the high school
Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
we do have curriculum for that. And this program could potentially even be adapted to be run in the school. But we wouldn't have the parent component, which can be different and potentially you can be missing that helpful step. But if you do it in a high school setting, it's really nice because they'll be practicing with kids that they could potentially actually interact with outside of the group often, or even develop friendships with. And again, with it being in the school setting, if they can have positive social interactions at school, that might help build their confidence and their self-esteem. So yes, I think they do run these groups there. I have not run one within a high school setting, but they do have the school-based curriculum available.
Okay. Thank you. Now we'll go to the younger age group. Is there peers for preschoolers, or can you recommend any resources for parents of preschoolers?
Yes, they are starting to work on, I think, developing curriculum for that younger age. And I don't think I also mentioned this, but the UCLA peers group does offer trainings and do online groups. And I think they currently have a group for preschoolers that they're doing and studying to see if, they can adapt it appropriately for that age group. So if you want any more information, potentially trying to check out the UCLA website. I think most of it is in English, but they do have some information about all the work they're doing on trying to find what's appropriate for younger kids.
Yeah. And also Dr. Zhanggu here in our group, who developed a different intervention, different than the peers group that's based more on pivotal response training and social motivation to help with social initiation.
Yes.
I think the paper was published, and the hope is that in the future we'll continue to do more work in this area.
Yeah.
Along the same line, in terms of talking about the research supporting the peers group, what additional information can you provide about that?
Yeah, the peers group has received a ton of, just support. A lot of people have been able to replicate this in different countries and show that it's effective in building relationships. So there's just been so much research done on it. And, again, I would really like to see it move to even more countries and be adapted. But what we've seen is just like having these different components of the didactics, of having parents be coaches, having video modeling as well as live modeling, and plenty of opportunities for practice. Those components have been researched and definitely shown to really lead to more relationships and higher quality friendships in the people who are participating in these groups.
Okay, thank you. And a question by the same person is regarding how genuinely the individual learn social interaction, learn how to communicate as a neurotypical. I don't know if you have any thoughts or experience about that.
I'm trying to understand the question a little bit. So it's how
Yeah, how typical, like if you have a autistic kid and you teach them how to interact, initiation, how typical their
Mhm.
behaviors
Got it.
end up.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. Again, our ultimate goal is not to turn individuals with autism into like neurotypical kids, but the goal is rather to give them the tools to successfully interact with people in our current society. So if they feel like they're not satisfied with their friendships and their relationships, or they're getting this feedback that they're not, being a good listener or being a good friend, we want to give them tools to be able to do that. And a lot of times when they're using these tools, they're still going to be them. And it might not look the same way as somebody who's neurotypical that might be using these tools. But it can still lead to improvements in their relationships with other people. And some people, within autism, social skills is very variable. Some kids are very actually skilled at, making tons of friends, and it can appear as though they are neurotypical. And then there are others who, their approach, it looks a little bit more atypical. So I think it just depends on the kid. But again, the goal is just that they have the skills and tools to develop friendships, whether or not that looks typical or not.
Yeah, and as you would expect, some kids would develop skills that might be very similar to what you see in typically developing kids. And unfortunately, there are some kids who will learn the skill, but it's not fine-tuned.
Yeah.
But the implementation is good enough to make them successful in developing and maintaining social interaction.
Yes.
Okay. Some specific questions about the peers group. What do graduates from this program, what do they say about the program 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later?
Yeah, great question. We've usually gotten pretty good feedback. Some of what the kids will say is, that they miss it. They miss having that predictability of like knowing that they're going to have that group of kids that they get to meet up with on a weekly basis. Some kids say they feel more confident in themselves. They feel less anxious during social interactions. And other kids have just said like that they feel good knowing that they know how to communicate with other kids, and that they're grateful that they've, established friendships and relationships. So I would say most of it has been really positive. I haven't heard too much negative. Some kids are more like neutral. They're like, that was great. Okay. They're used to going to a variety of different services. So they're just like, yeah, that was another service, another, treatment.
Very good. Another question is that how is the peers group different than other social skills curriculum?
Yeah, I think one thing is that it's, evidence-based. So they've done, again, a lot of research to show that what they've put together is effective in building relationships, whereas some of the other social skills programs have not been established as an evidence-based treatment yet. And I think the other thing is that it requires both the parent and the teen to be involved. So some programs only are the kids practicing with other kids. So this parent-assisted program allows parents to be more involved and requires them to be more involved, which I think sometimes can make the progress happen quicker because they're the ones like helping support them in finding sources of friends and really practicing the skills with them often because they know what the skills are. If you just send your teen to a social skills group, you kind of hope that they learn it. And then maybe you just transition to the next thing in your life. But this really requires that parents be involved. So I think that part is a little bit what sets it apart from other groups.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference between the peers group and other. Okay, question I think you touched on is planning to use peers in online setting. Are you, it looks like the UCLA group have been trying to do that. Have you done it, or do you have experience with that?
Yes, we absolutely have done it. And one of the main reasons we had to do it was because of COVID. And we've seen some pros and cons to it. One pro is that because families are already so busy, this allowed them to participate. They would have like maybe not been able to drive to the clinic and drive home and have dinner and all of that. So some of them felt like it reduced the barrier of getting to the group. Some others felt like it was great because when they're in their rooms, they can kind of share toys and like pull things up on their screen, and we can bring in like videos and do all sorts of things that we maybe wouldn't be able to do as easily in the group setting. But there also has been kids who feel like maybe they're not as connected to the other group members because they're kind of just on the other side of a screen, and it's kind of associated with when they were doing like distant learning, and sometimes it just feels more like class than like a group. So we've seen mixed feedback on the online group, but overall people still benefited from it and felt that it was useful.
Thank you. Is there any plan, as far as you know, to have a shortened version of the peers group, the peers program?
Yeah, I mean, I have not necessarily heard of anything less than the 14 weeks. There's groups that are longer than the 14 weeks that have been adapted for kids who might have like intellectual disabilities and things like that. But I agree that it would maybe be probably more feasible for families if it was kind of more shortened, but nothing that I'm aware of at this time.
Okay, very good. A question in terms of the baseline communication etiquette or communication norm. How did people come up with that? Because as you mentioned, they are the foundation of the for peers.
Yeah, so the way that Dr. Lageson kind of came up with how you engage in this like training of information is just looking at socially skilled people and what specific behaviors they do, like asking questions, listening for the response, then providing your own response and asking a question. So it was based on kind of ecological data that was collected on just social skills and socially successful people. And again, this book is based on social norms in America, where maybe in other countries, that's not exactly how they would trade information. So it's important to consider what a good conversation would look like in your society, and then help coach your teen in that.
Very good. Thank you. I'm just mindful of the time. We'll try to stop like 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So
Okay.
we'll take 2 questions here. There's still other questions, and some people have multiple questions. I'm trying to handpick a little bit the questions. Don't read too much into it. I'm just being mindful of the time. So how about help autistic youth to learn how to date and to understand safe, healthy relationships?
Yeah, so there is this movement because a lot of the focus and intervention has been on younger kids, and not so much what happens when they become young adults who want to date and have these sort of things. And as I mentioned, there's a whole manual dedicated to how to provide these skills to young adults. So they have a group that is dedicated for young adults. And I think if any of you guys have watched the show Love on the Spectrum on Netflix, they had Dr. Lageson on there who was providing some of the coaching for them, which is really funny. But so yes, there is a lot of work that's being done to try to support youth who are, transitioning into adulthood and going through all these different types of changes within their social relationships. So yes, there's a manual for that.
Okay. Thank you. One last question.
Mm-hmm.
So so when kids learn these skills,
Mm-hmm.
how do we make sure that are generalizable to real life setting? That's
Yeah.
the $1 million question.
Yes, and that's why we have homework in this group. We don't want them to just be practicing in their safety bubble of home or in their safety bubble of the group. They have to actually start applying it to when they're interacting with kids at school, when they're interacting with kids at soccer practice, so we want them to generalize it by practicing it in the settings that they're with kids naturally. So that would be my biggest recommendation, is making sure that they're actually using these skills in the different variety of settings that they're in. And if you're not there to coach them, maybe asking, for teachers, how has my kid been interacting with other kids? Or asking the child themselves, like, what felt good about it? Did you use this skill? Did you use that skill? But yes, they just need to practice it in a variety of settings to make it generalizable. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something people have to be aware of is that part of the cognitive difficulties or challenge that kids with autism have is generalizability of skills. And we see that not only in kids with autism, we see it also in kids with ADHD. So
Mhm.
they learn the skill in a controlled environment, but it's very hard to generalize it to typical setting or natural setting. Very
Yes.
good. So I think this brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to thank everyone for their attendance. I want to thank Dr. Hurts for this very informative lecture. Thank you, Ali. This is your last webinar supporting
Ali.
us. And I want to thank Donna, Irena, Daria, and Dimitri. It looks like we have a new individual here who will be helping us out in the future. Both of them are Dimitri? Okay, very good. Okay, that makes it easy to remember. Thank you, everyone, and have a good summer. And hopefully, by the time next time we meet, things will be a little bit more stable in Ukraine. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day or in the evening. Bye-bye. Thank you, Jessica, again.
Thank you.